Hello and welcome back to the KCC channel. I'm Rob and I hope you are having a wonderful day today. Today I've got 5 stories for you from your favorite subreddit, ProRevenge. Before we start, if you're not already subscribed to the channel, please hit that subscribe button. It's completely free and you can always change your mind later. But please don't, because my wife says she'll spank me for every one of you that hits that button. And that sounds like a good time. Moving on. Our first story today comes to us from Small Town TA. Sometimes I wonder what kind of person I'd be if I had never been medicated at all. 6-year-old girl gets revenge on a bully. Let's jump right in. I'll be honest here, sometimes I think about the time I got revenge on my childhood bully. For context, I was still in the trial phase of searching for the right ADHD medication. I was 6 years old at the time of this story, and outside of my parents and my daycare and elementary teachers, no one else has heard this before. There was a girl who had just moved to the area and was only there while her dad was stationed at the army camp or base, whatever you want to call it. She was an aggressive, most likely angsty, angry teen who was tired of moving every 2 to 3 years. I see that now as an adult. I'm 22, so this was about 15-ish years ago. Anyway, I had to sit at the very front of the bus because I had a severe peanut allergy. This girl, we'll call her Kendra, partly for anonymity, partly because I can't remember her name now, had gotten into some serious trouble and was forced to sit at the front with me for the next 2 weeks. Each day, she would take my backpack and throw it on the ground, stomping on it and getting it covered in mud, before she'd shove me into the wall and sit on me. Keep in mind, she was a rather heavy-set 13 or 14-year-old, and I was a 6-year-old who weighed maybe 30-something pounds soaking wet. I was incredibly tiny, thanks IBS, and she would use that to her advantage. We had folders called moose books, and she on a few occasions took my homework and notes out and ripped them up, or crumpled them so that I couldn't write well on them, which led me to have to pull my card 2 times. One particular day, she saw that I had just gotten a new pair of glasses, really cool early 2000s sunglasses. She took them off my face and snapped them in half before resuming her regularly scheduled crushing me against the window session. I was sobbing in pain and absolutely terrified. The bus was so loud I couldn't be heard over the noise. The next afternoon, I decided, maybe that's a strong word, to get revenge. I sucked bruises like hickeys into my own skin, on my arms mainly. I also bit myself hard enough to bruise for good measure. When I got off the bus at my after-school daycare, again after being hurt, but not like what I'd done to myself, my teacher freaked out. I told my teachers that my bully had been biting me and punching me, hence the bruises. They ended up calling my parents, who then called the school. My bully ended up having to change bus routes, and I also got in trouble, but just for lying. They reviewed the camera footage and saw everything but the part I'd lied about, obviously. Thing is though, I didn't feel remorse until I got into trouble myself. Only then did I feel bad. I feel like I could have handled it better, but hey, not bad for a 6-year-old, right? Jumping down to the comments on this one, there was a pretty good comment on there from a school bus driver that I'd like to share with you. It's from a user called Maniacal Gleam. It says, "I'm a school bus driver. I'm sorry this happened. When I put kids in the front seat for any bullying behavior, I make them sit alone so they don't have targets. The seat just to the right of the driver is the best place for bullies. I use the seat behind me for kids who have issues that require front seat access and aren't the kids harming others. The driver failed you. The first thing I do when told about bullies is check my cameras. Then assign appropriate consequences. That should have happened for you, and you should never have been ignored and forced to try and deal with it on your own." Now, OP replied to this one as well. It says, "I don't blame him. He was my first bus driver. I had 3, and he was up there in age and nearing retirement. We had a very rowdy group of students, and he likely couldn't hear me from all the other yelling. I was a pipsqueak too, so I don't hold him accountable for it." Okay, so I need to chime in on that one because I was the little guy in school myself and I got picked on quite a bit. If you're at the front of the bus, let's be honest, there's no way that driver wouldn't have heard you screaming if you had somebody sitting on you. I honestly think if this was something that was going on and on, it's just that the bus driver didn't want to deal with it. Fortunately, these days when you ride a school bus, they have cameras. But not only do they have cameras, but most of the kids on the bus have cell phones with cameras as well. This next story comes to us from Tubis61, dealing with an entitled neighbor. Let's jump right in. Just flipping through a few stories and reading about entitled drivers getting their just desserts. This made me think back to my days as a paramedic. We got a call to a house where there was a bariatric patient who had fallen. The patient was morbidly obese and weighed around 30 stone, 420 pounds. This story isn't really about them though. There are many reasons people get to this size, and I've never judged, only helped. No, the problem here was a really arrogant neighbor we had come across before, and boy was this chap a judgmental moron. Our patient had a car and had a disabled parking permit. They also had a council-designated disabled parking spot outside their home, which the neighbor kept parking in. There had been a number of letters from the council regarding this, and a number of parking fines just served to annoy this chap even more. On the day of the story, I took the call that the patient had fallen, and we went to the house. Sure enough, the neighbor was not only parked in the disabled spot, but had parked a second car blocking access to the patient's driveway. I assessed the patient and suspected they had a broken hip, so needed to go in. I sent my colleague round to the neighbor to ask them to move the cars, and when I came back, I was told the neighbor had just told my colleague to do one. No problem, time to get the message home. I radioed through to our control center and asked for the fire service and police. We needed the fire service to help lift the guy and the police to do a little parking control. The fire service were the first to arrive, and I spoke to the crew commander and let them know what the situation was. A fireman went to the house to ask the neighbor to move the car, and was told the same as my colleague. The message was relayed back, and the watch commander just asked me one question: is the patient's life at risk? I knew exactly where this was going, and it was time our thoughtless neighbor got the message. My answer was, yes, there is equipment I need to get into the house, and the driveway is blocked, preventing me doing so. The watch commander told the fire truck driver to move those vehicles. It was really satisfying to see both vehicles being pushed down the road by the fire service, and the look on the neighbor's face as he came out spitting and screaming was well worth seeing. His complaints to the police fell on deaf ears. They were well aware of his history of obstruction, and my clinical assessment that the patient's life was in danger was more than enough justification for the vehicles to be moved. I doubt it made our patient's life any easier, and sadly they died a few months later without leaving the hospital, but it really did bring a smile to their face as we wheeled them out. So one thing I want to point out on this one that might be different in various places around the world, but I know it's how it works here, is that if the fire department comes out and they're blocked by somebody and they have to use their equipment to get that person's vehicle out of the way, they're actually going to send a bill to that person later for the damage done to their truck because it was their fault, not the firefighter's fault. That is amazing. Now, a lot of the comments underneath this story mentioned that these people would have learned a lesson. Well, I don't think they actually learned a lesson. They might have been taught a lesson, but I don't think they learned it because not everybody out there has the capability or wants to learn, especially the kind of people we're dealing with in this story. This next story comes to us from Historical Day 9518. Want to have your cake and eat it too? Two-timing baby daddy gets his just desserts. Let's jump right in. For context, years ago, I, 20 female, and the father of my first two children, 26 male, were going through a rough time in our relationship. He was working night shift as a janitor in a nursing home, while I was going to college for nursing during the day. We had a 1-year-old, and I had just given birth to our son 3 months earlier. There was a woman that he worked with that I had gotten to know pretty well when I would bring him his lunches. We were friends, or so I thought. He was supposed to be waxing floors at the night when no one was up and about. Just so happened my cousin ran into him and her having drinks at a local bar on one of the nights that he was supposed to be working. Cue massive fight. Got off early, just friends, blah blah blah, won't happen again. About a month later comes the talk. We have been fighting too much. Let's keep this amicable for the kids and stay friends. Mind you, the house was mine. I paid the bills with grants and scholarships I earned through school. The car he drove was mine too. I would be nice and allow him to stay till he got something figured out, still take my car to work. I still fed him all that good nonsense. Then he starts being loving and we continue a physical relationship. I happen to be feeding our son one morning while he still sleeps and his phone goes off. I know, don't look for it, you don't want to know, right? Turns out, he's been carrying on a relationship with the other woman the whole time he's been with me. It would have been fine if that's what he wanted, if he wasn't doing the same with me at the same time. Cue petty revenge. I crawled back into bed with him naked, and he snuggled up like he always does. I took pictures from his phone, nice and graphic ones. I sent them to her from his phone, along with a very nice, in my opinion, worded message explaining everything that he had been up to and into. Then I got dressed to the wonderful pings from his phone and continued about my day packing his things. He woke a few hours later and went for his phone first thing. I happen to come into the room as he's trying to call her, and when he turns to look at me, I can see all the blood rush from his face. He can't even mount a defense as I tell him all about the conversation me and his new girlfriend have had, along with some photos. All his things are now out on the porch boxed up. I tell him he no longer lives in my house and to leave. He starts to blubber about where will he go, so I told him that he'd better call his girlfriend to come pick him up and live with her, because he sure as hell isn't using my vehicle anymore, and that sounds like his problem. And I shut the door on him. I had been with this man-child for 6 years, given my body, heart, and sanity to this man. Heck, I was even willing to still let him live there, not paying bills, eat there, and drive my car for him to be sleeping with both of us at the same time. Was it petty? Hell yeah, but it was deserved. This story turned completely when OP mentioned at the end that they'd been with this guy for 6 years. At the beginning they said they were 20 and he was 26. So if they've been together for 6 years, that means she was 14 and he was 20. Whoa, that's a big no right there. OP, I hope you stay as far away as you possibly can from this guy. I mean, make sure he does right by your kids, but this guy does not need to be in your life otherwise. It's time for you to find somebody your own age who's not looking to groom kids. This next story comes to us from Blue-Eyed Brunette. I don't like liars. Let's jump right in. This happened 5+ years ago, and it's still one of my proudest moments. I was dating this guy Dan, going through a custody battle with his ex-girlfriend over their toddler. We worked at the same bar with this girl named Billie Jean. Billie Jean was an old friend of Dan and had worked with him before. She also had previously worked with the mother of Dan's child, Rachel, and everyone was seemingly friends and remaining civil, or so I thought. Billie Jean had secretly taken sides and wrote a terrible affidavit lying about Dan. Dan somehow got a copy of it. I don't remember how the court process went. As I was reading it, I kept getting more and more irate. I hate liars. And one thing I really feel that crosses a boundary is using a child for leverage to hurt the other parent. Billie Jean was knowingly lying under oath and siding with Rachel to prevent Dan from parenting his kid, and he was by no means a bad dad. Well, Billie Jean had enemies that I worked with and had easy access to contact. These enemies had sold Billie Jean a car that she wasn't paying them for. I didn't necessarily like the people who owned the car, but the enemy of my enemy is my friend. I called them up and told them I came in peace. I asked if they had Billie Jean's address to get back their car. They did not. I passed off Billie Jean's info and waited for her to call me. Now, I was one of 2 people who could have ratted out the location of the car, and when Billie Jean called me to tell me her car got repoed, she said she had no idea who could have done it. It would have either been me or her ex Robbie. I tell her casually, I don't think it was Robbie. And I swear up and down she responded with, well, who would have done it then? I held back laughter and finished the conversation with a half-butt, oh, I don't know, that's so weird type of comment until she hung up. Dan was next to me in the car snickering. Dan won shared custody of his child, and Billie Jean lost her bar job because she didn't have transportation to work an hour away. To this day, I wonder if she ever pieced together that it was me. I don't like liars. Okay, wait a minute here, because I don't think this is how the song goes. In this case, Billie Jean was his lover, and the kid is his son. I swear I heard that song differently. Now, I honestly think that any parent that gets in the way of the child seeing their other parent is a gigantic butthole. But even bigger than that is somebody that isn't part of that previous relationship who's trying to keep them away from the child as well. That person is a super butthole. Our last story today comes to us from Quiet Fangirl. Mom takes down the HOA from the inside. Let's jump right in. My neighborhood does not have a homeowners association, at least not anymore. When my parents first moved in, my older sibling was maybe 2 years old, and with me as a little glowworm, there was an HOA. They took money from the neighborhood in exchange for their services. At first, and for quite a while, my parents just kinda shrugged it off. The HOA shoveled the snow off the streets in winter and dealt with trash collection, so they were doing something worthwhile, right? Ha, no. The city controlled the snowplows and the garbage trucks, not the HOA. But still, there was the illusion of effort. And besides, one summer they decided to contract a company to plant new trees all over the neighborhood. The fact that the company was owned by the son of the head of the HOA was totally coincidental. The trees were the beginning of the end for the HOA. Why? Well, my grandma on my dad's side was visiting when they came around to plant the trees. My grandma, who is a certified master gardener, and so she stared through the windows of our house as the guys planting the trees just dropped the saplings on the grass, still with their roots inside the bag they came in. No holes dug, no holes cut, just bagged sapling lying on the grass like a pathetic and sad stick. The saplings laid there all night. No one came back to actually do their job and plant them. My master gardener grandma mentioned offhand that those saplings were going to die unless they got in the soil. And something clicked in my mom's head. She was paying the HOA money, actual money, every month, while both she and my dad worked taking care of 2 very little kids, sending us to daycare and preschool, and arranging babysitters and feeding us. And the homeowners association was just going to pull this half-butt bullcrap instead of do what she's paying them for? No effing way. So she showed up to the head of the HOA's house and basically demanded that the trees get planted properly like she's apparently paying for them to do. The head of the HOA, so excited for someone to actually care about the neighborhood, made their second mistake. They asked if Mom wanted to join the HOA. She agreed. The trees were planted, but most didn't make it. My grandma was right. First things first, my mom showed up to the next HOA meeting. There were like 5 people there. No wonder they asked Mom to join. They desperately needed the people. So Mom looked at this collection of people, herself included, who weren't even paying money to the HOA like the rest of the neighborhood. All the contractors the HOA called in were close relatives of other HOA members and weren't paid by the HOA. After all, they're family. So my mom started digging. She spent pretty much a full summer taking down the HOA before she had to go back to teaching in the fall. With me carted along after her and my sibling old enough to be in school or daycare, she dug through the years of paperwork detailing the HOA's financial situation. And she found something extremely enlightening. The HOA didn't actually do anything. Well, they didn't do anything to benefit the community. Everything they claimed to do was either covered by the individual homeowner or by the city itself. So they were collecting money from all the neighborhood residents under false pretenses. And actually, they weren't even supposed to be in our neighborhood. Their association zone was a whole different neighborhood. So what is a working mother of 2 small children to do while her husband is off at work and she's off for the summer? She goes door to door with pamphlets, me and my sibling in a stroller, as she weaves her way through the neighborhood blocks, pamphlets explaining the situation and how to stop paying for services you'll never get. Pamphlets that are, of course, written in both English and Spanish to account for the high amount of Latino and Hispanic people in our neighborhood. And naturally, she's got a lawyer and an accountant. It put a major dent in her pocket, but if it meant the entire neighborhood wasn't exploited for money each month, it was worth every penny. Another HOA member helped her sift through the documents and data and pass out pamphlets and encourage people to show up to the meetings, but had to back out because of work-related reasons. My mom rolled up to the courthouse flanked by the lawyer and accountant, her kids safe at home with her husband, and had more than enough evidence to get the Homeowners Association the F out of her neighborhood, expose the fraudsters for the frauds they were, and make sure that no HOA would ever push their luck in our neighborhood. It's been almost 19 years and no one's even tried making another HOA in our neighborhood. So you mean to tell me that after so many years of all these people in the neighborhood paying them, they didn't have to pay back any of the money even though they were completely committing fraud? Sounds to me like crime might actually pay. I wonder if my neighborhood needs an HOA. Keep in mind, if there is a registered HOA in your neighborhood, then if you do a title search, it's actually going to show that HOA. So if you run a title search on your property and it doesn't show that HOA, you might be paying into something that shouldn't be there. Check out OP, linked in the description down below. If you haven't yet, make sure you hit the subscribe button on the KCC channel. I thank you for watching. I hope you have a wonderful day, and we'll see you tomorrow.